Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for Take This Job and Shove It, Stress, Burnout, and Turnover in the Workplace. Dr. B's Leave a Lifeprint Academy is proud to host today's session as part of our continuing education program, composed of live and on-demand courses to provide you with the most relevant, credible, and applicable information to impact your work and life. Dr. B Leave a Lifeprint Incorporated and Leave a Lifeprint Academy is approved as an IASET accredited provider, offers IASET CEUs for its learning events that comply with the ANSI and IASET continuing education and training standard, and is also recognized by the SHRM to offer professional development credits, PDCs, for SHRM CP or SHRM SCP, and is recognized to offer general recertification credit hours toward HR Certification Institute, HRCI. Whether you're in the audience now or watching this on demand, here are some housekeeping items to make note of. For this webinar, attendees will be muted and in a listen-only mode. If you are here today, we love hearing from you and want this to be an engaging experience for attendees. If you want to submit a question or comment during the presentation, please use the Q&A window. Our presenter will do their best to answer your questions at the end of the session. To receive credit for this session today, attendees must attend the entire duration of the program and are required to participate via web link, not only audio dial-in. The dial-in information is provided for those who do not have speakers. If you're currently joining us only by phone, you will not be able to receive credit since there are verification prompts that require a computer or laptop via internet connection. Please ensure to click OK on the attendance verification prompts that appear on your screen throughout the program. At the end of the event, a link will appear for the certification process. Please click on this link to receive your certification. If for any reason you must leave or you would like to rewatch today's session, this course will be recorded and made available on demand ASAP after the event. You can access the course on our catalog by signing into the account you registered with. Registrants will also receive a follow-up email once the recording is available. If you're watching this session on demand, please note you must watch the entire duration of the recording. After the session, you will be prompted to complete a required post-test. You must score an 80% or higher to receive credit. If you need technical assistance, please submit your request under the Tech Support tab in the Q&A window on your computer screen. Finally, we appreciate your time in filling out the evaluation form at the end of this session. We are looking forward to your feedback and ways we can improve in future sessions. We will now introduce today's instructor, Dr. B.
Hello, everyone. It is so fabulous to be here with you. I'm Dr. B, as you probably already know, and today's class is called Take This Job and Shove It, Stress, Burnout, and Turnover in the Workplace, because as we all know, work has changed dramatically. All right, so here's the agenda today. We're going to talk about the Great Resignation. We're going to talk about what's causing the rush to the door, and that's actually based in research, the Deloitte study. And we're going to, which is actually how the 4-day work week is really the new future of work, which I'm sure many people will love, but businesses are a little apprehensive about. We will also talk about how is mental health involved, the awareness of mental health in the workplace, because we've never really incorporated mental health before, and feelings of helplessness and what employers can do to maintain a healthy, happy workforce. All right, so let's get started with a poll. This involves you, so here you go. You're going to get a poll. Please respond, and then we're going to jump into this topic. Okay, so the poll is about generational differences and who falls under the baby boomer generation, Gen X generation, millennials, and the Gen Zers. These are the people who make up most of, or pretty much all of the workforce today. So what we find happening is that millennials and Gen Z work very differently than boomers and Gen X. Even Gen X and boomers work differently, but they're more similar, and millennials and Gen Z work differently, but there are more similarities. We're in a transformational shift in generational differences overall. So there's a cycle that happens with generations, and when about 80 to 100 years, about the span of a life cycle happens, there is generally a gigantic transformation in culture related to the reset of generational differences. And so we are in that transformational period, but most people don't understand that or know what to do about it. And so what's happening is a little bit of chaos in the workplace. So we have the great resignation. What's causing the rush to the door? Well, there's so many things that are happening or that have happened that are causing millennials and Gen Zs to say, I'm not doing this. And where baby boomers originally were never going to retire are actually now retiring at a higher rate than before. So there's a lot of things happening in the generational theory sphere that helps us to understand how to run businesses and keep people at the focus and the forefront of our work in order to maintain what businesses do, ideally get a return on their investment, which is their people. All right. So the great resignation, what's causing the rush to the door? Historically, transformational events. We have just experienced over the past, I'll say 3 years, but we have experienced some massive transformational events that have risen, that our awareness has become enlightened around ending systemic racism, protecting the women's right to their own bodies. And we have struggled through a global pandemic where the US lost over 1 million people, and our workforces were just taken to the ground. So with this, let's take another poll real quick. And I have another question for you. What do parents want most for their children? I think you can read it, but what do you, please respond to what parents want most for their children. I ask this question a lot and I always get one answer. So I'm very curious to hear what your responses will be. Okay, and it's accurate. So the responses that you could choose from were health and happiness, education and wealth, status and money, family and friends. Overwhelmingly, what parents want for their children when given those options are health and happiness. People often just say, I want my children to be healthy and happy. Most people can relate to that. So in this transformation of generational differences, what we also know is that we have taught millennials and Gen Z to work for their happiness. And because they have experienced the front line of these very, very big experiences, the pandemic and racism and all the isms, they're working differently. They're working differently than their parents did, and their parents have taught them that that is a good thing. However, at the same time, they're in the workforce with their parents' generation, and because everybody works differently, it's causing this uproar in the workforce. All right. So, who remembers this phrase? Question authority, or just say no. Parenting practices really do define. I mean, we can explain what's happening now with millennials and Gen Z in the workforce just by looking at parenting practices and how they've changed over the decades. And so what boomers and Gen X have done is raise children who actually are much more involved in and understanding their own feelings and the importance of their own mental health. And so now they're expecting that in the workplace in different ways. So we expect kids to do health and happiness our way. But the reality is that our way as Gen X and boomers is actually very different than millennials and Gen Z. We're going to get to that. The world is changing so fast that there are ways in which that are no longer relevant. You know, we live in this fast-paced world of technology, and millennials and Gen Z, that really defines who they are in so many ways, that technology and those innovations. And it's on fast forward, where boomers and Gen X actually experienced a slower growth in technology and use of technology in their work. It was much more separate. We had family and we had work, where Gen Z and millennials are now combining work and family. And most importantly, and please write this down if you, or log it somewhere, values are the most important thing to these two younger generations. And so if an organization or business does not have their values and mission very clearly defined, these younger employees are going to walk out the door. So we also need to trust and support our young adults in the workforce to know what's best for themselves. Parents have raised children to say, trust your gut. Be aware of your feelings, understand yourself. And so there's a different level of personal awareness that these two younger generations were allowed to explore at a younger age. And so they're doing exactly what we said. But at the same time in the workplace, it comes back to us and it's like, oh, wow, like I didn't mean that. But in reality, yes, that's going to benefit all of us in the long run, because we do need the original boomers and Gen Xers to be the wise guides for the younger generations of millennials and Gen Zs, and combine that in order to truly innovate and to really create the workforce of the future. So there's a picture here on this slide of a bubble wrapped child. And you've heard the phrase probably helicopter parents. You know, Gen X has been in so many ways, because one of the things about Gen X is that they view themselves as a generation that raised themselves. So then as parents, guess what they did? Here's the psychological piece of this. They backed up the train and they're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Nobody was around when I was a kid. I didn't have a cell phone. I ran around till dark and then just came home. And so instead, they kind of bubble wrapped their children and protected them on a whole different level than their parents did when they were being raised, which is, neither one is right or wrong. It just is what it is. And we have to work with what we have. And so we've sent these messages to people about, or these young people in particular, like question authority and just say no. Well, now they're big and they're grown-ups and they're working at side by side with us, and they're saying no, and we're not okay with that. But we need to be okay with that because we're not as far apart as people really think. All right. So the pandemic, the global pandemic, COVID-19 really rattled our universe. Clearly, we all know that. What it brought to life for most people is that life is short. Mortality is real. Feelings matter more than ever, not because of parenting practices that contributed, but now the feelings around big things happening around mortality creates a very highly volatile and emotional scene. We also have innovation and technology growing at a faster rate than ever before. I want you to look at this assembly line. It's auto workers retooling their manufacturing company to make ventilators. You remember when that happened? Okay, phenomenal, just phenomenal. That could never have happened without all generations involved, because the decision makers to do that are probably in Gen X or boomers, and the technology in order to do it and some of the creativity and brilliance came from, the decisions came from Gen X and boomers, but the technology and innovation probably came from millennials. So, or, a combination. So this is an amazing pivot during a global pandemic with very little time and nobody really knowing what's going on. But it happened, and that speaks to the integration of generations being able to create amazing things when they do work together. The trouble is we have to teach the generations to work together and get the most out of each other. So innovation is influenced by modern day tools. And we have modern day tools like, I'm going to say it, hold your breath, cell phones. So many people are like, oh, good, it just drives me crazy because they're texting all the time or they're fiddling on their phone all the time. And this is so annoying. But in reality, it's that innovation and that technology that also makes this kind of innovation happen. And so we have to be able to have conversations and be transparent and talk about both sides' expectations around the tools that we have. I love this slide, and I want you to really just take a moment to take it in. Look at that. Look at that head skull of barbed wire. It's so important. Okay. The power of mental health and how I ended up here talking to business, because business is going to fail without understanding and integrating mental health into the workplace like it's never happened before. All right, so let's first talk about the ACEs study. The ACEs study is a transformational landmark study that reveals that early trauma actually has long-term physical health consequences that happen decades later. So it's a screening, it's 10 questions, you can look it up. We have some stuff on our website about it. You can check it out. It's a super quick screening, but what's not obvious to everybody at this point is that when bad things happen to young people, the consequences show up physically in our physical health, blood pressure, diabetes, heart attack, or dying early, up to 20 years early from trauma in early childhood or in under 18. So this is what this landmark study revealed to us, is the consequences of trauma on people's lives. So if you know this information, then you're going to be much more focused on mental health in early childhood and your children's lives as well as your own experience. Now, it's not all bad. So I know that all sounds terrible. Oh my gosh, I had trauma. I'm now going to die 20 years early. That is not the case, because most people have some reserves of resilience. And resilience is the ability to overcome adversity. And humanity is very flexible. And one of the things that's so amazing about resilience is, and this is my area of expertise and study, is that it really only takes one relationship in our early lives to support our ability to overcome adversity, ACEs, in our early childhood and kind of retool that into resilience, the ability to overcome adversity. Doesn't always happen. We use resilience in the wrong way all the time. I listened to it on a show last night and I thought, that is not how you define resilience. But okay, we need to understand resilience better. But there are benefits to being resilient because it means that you've experienced adversity and you've learned how to overcome it. And so there is a huge power in business to mental health, to understanding mental health and to being open to integrating mental health into an organization. It's highly undervalued, underestimated, and completely misunderstood because so many people are armchair psychologists, unfortunately. And we live in a meme culture where somebody posts on Facebook or Twitter or on social media, these just one sentence lines about mental health that may or may not even be true. So mental health in the workplace is coming. There's no denying it. And any organization that fails to embrace understanding mental health for their workforce will, at this point in history, at the transformational of these 4-generational shift, will suffer the consequences and probably implode. Okay, so woke culture, let's talk about that for a minute, because the definition in the dictionary is being aware of and actively attentive to important societal facts and issues, especially issues of racial and social justice. Okay, why are we talking about this? Because the pandemic brought us to a big awareness about our mortality. Young people often in their 20s don't really think that they're going to die. They know somebody's going to die, but it's not them. There's also, the pandemic brought to our awareness so many social injustices and the realization of historical events that oftentimes, well, really not oftentimes, that have completely gone unnoticed and ignored, can't be ignored anymore. And the exposure to information, because we were all staying home and watching the news and seeing what was happening with this pandemic, but we were also seeing what was happening right in outside our front door to people. George Floyd, there's a myriad of social injustices that were brought to light while we were all COVID-19 pandemic housebound. So, and not that those things didn't happen before, but the awareness created this woke culture. People came out of the woodwork. Now, it wasn't just because of the pandemic. It really was because these younger generations were actually, it comes back to parenting practices, were also raised by parents and society that said, oh yeah, actually you are allowed to talk about this. You are allowed to notice it. You are allowed to, remember, question authority. And not only can you question authority, but you are also allowed to say no. And they listened, which is the most beautiful part of it. However, it's also sort of the difficult part of life when you have, say, a toddler who says no all the time. It's perfectly developmentally appropriate, and you wouldn't want a toddler who didn't say no. However, it can be a little bit maddening when you have a 2-year-old running around telling you no constantly. So we have to reconcile our understanding of all of these things that have happened. And now these generations are driven by values, and they will not work without understanding that their employers are not only aware, but are on board with executing their values. And they will walk out. They will not work with a, a company that is not diverse, and they will not work with a company that is counter to their value system. So this is why I say take this job and shove it, because that is basically what they're saying is we have stress, we have burnout, and we're out of here because we want to do things not all the way our way, but at least some of the way our way. All right. We have all felt helpless through the pandemic, through the last 3 years. There have been so many frontline workers who have just been used and abused, and and have also stepped up to the plate in ways that are just heroic, really truly heroic. And so feelings of helplessness, this is where resiliency actually kicks in some ways. It can either totally take you under, which is why our levels of depression and anxiety and suicide are all just off the chart. But it also can fuel passion and conviction for change, which is where we are in this historical moment. Those feelings of helplessness crushed people's mental health. We've seen it, we're experiencing it. We know our mental health systems are completely overwhelmed. We lack the capacity or scalability to provide the level of mental health care needed to address the mental health issues in this country. Now, what I want to say to that is, I train clinical doctoral students. There is nowhere near enough mental health providers at a doctoral level, at a master's level, at a therapeutic level to serve everybody who needs mental health support. So it needs to be mental health concepts that are accurate and that are research based and that are well utilized need to be embedded into our workplace culture and into our culture in general. I can tell you this, that I want to say there is one mental health provider that includes a social worker, a psychologist, or a psychiatrist. And it's something like, I should have wrote this statistic down today. I want to say it's like one therapist to every 1 million people in the US. I mean, it's just some ridiculous number. We're not all going to have access to mental health care on a therapeutic level. So we have to find new and strategic ways to meet the needs of mental health for large groups of populations, because everybody now knows we all need some mental health care sometimes. So this is critical. Like, we have to get over our head in the sand that we are going to just scale this problem up. We're not going to. We can't train enough highly qualified mental health providers and take care of those people's mental health at the same time in the amount of time that we have to start to correct this huge disruption in our culture and lives, especially in business. So change, some of the best changes in the whole world don't cost any money at all. It just costs a decision. It costs committing your heart and soul to doing something differently. And so we can do this. Like, we know how to do this, and we teach people how to do this all the time and love this part of our work. But people have to be open to change, and they have to be willing to think outside the box. In the grand scheme of things, the benefits far, far outweigh the costs, because ultimately what a lot of organizations that have been around for over 100 years don't realize yet is that because of this 4-generation cycle transformation, and because that creates a much bigger, powerful shift in our entire culture, those organizations, those types of organizations that are very much stuck in their roots of how they did things in the past, that maybe were potentially built on systemic isms, systemic racism, systemic gender inequity, systemic all kinds of things, that they might need to retool their policies and procedures to meet the values and the needs of the innovative future. All right, we are in a crisis. And this is Christina Maslach, she's a PhD professor at the University of California, Berkeley. So this is what she says. When you're truly dealing with burnout, you're not just mentally and physically exhausted. You are literally, you're gone. You're gone. You can't do the work. It's a crisis. And we can't have the people who are taking care of other people burned out. If they're burned out, they can't do the work that we need done, especially frontline medical workers, but also, grocery stores, gas stations. There's so many things that we really, if they just close down forever, we're in big trouble. We've experienced that now. We're in a crisis. Now look at these pictures. I want you to take a moment and really take a look at these pictures. Little girl, now she's a teenager, young adult. Little boy, now he's an older man. So this is where we talk about adverse childhood experiences, the ACEs study. This is what it taught us. There is a connection between our mental health and our physical health. What we go to the doctor for, our heart, our diabetes, our blood pressure, our vision, our hearing, all kinds of things that we go to the physical doctor for, the MD for, are actually truly connected to our early experiences and life experiences. If we don't address mental health, if we don't address the mental health consequences of burnout, we create the physical long-term consequences in the body. And so because we didn't necessarily have this connection in this information so concretely when baby boomers were coming onto the workforce, women were coming into the workforce, that was the real triumph of that generation, was that bringing women into the workforce in a meaningful way. So we weren't talking about mental health, we were talking about equality, we were talking about civil rights. Gen X, same thing. These were different things were happening historically at that time. But today, the crisis lands in the Twin Towers falling, terrorism, war on TV, watching it day in and day out, technology, having cell phones, having access to social media, and then the just overwhelming pandemic, 100-year, crisis that nobody could see coming, and then boom, it happened. So we have to now acknowledge at work that this is where ROI comes in. If you care about return on investment, if you care about business and doing business in a way that supports people's values, but also is a return on investment, then there has to be a focus on mental health. Because mental health, when we focus on mental health and we focus on policies and procedures that support young workers and their families, what we get back is a return on our investment. And what we get back is fewer sick days. We get back happier employees. We get back loyal employees. We get back dedicated employees who go above and beyond because they know, remember, they work off their values. If we value them, and I don't want to say we and them because I think of them as we too. So when we all value each other and the needs that we all have, then we can create a business strategy that will work for everyone. All right, a crisis. I just can't say it enough. Depression and anxiety are at all-time highs. There's no way around it. The first year of COVID, 25% increase globally in depression and anxiety. And you can't know something, you can't unknow something once you already know it. When the cat's out of the bag, we say this all the time, the genie's out of the bottle, the cat's out of the bag. Once the cat's out of the bag, the cat's in the room. You cannot ignore the cat. So we now know, okay, depression and anxiety are really important to pay attention to because guess what? They have long-term physical health consequences to our body and our lifespan. So we can't unknow something. And once you're aware, then you have to manage it. You have to deal with it. So I want you to take a quick look at this picture. It's one of those illusion pictures. So what do you see first? The first thing you see, I don't know, maybe you see the man's face. Or maybe you see the person, the woman walking across the park. Now, for the longest time, because I get all locked into what I see, I saw the man's face and I'm like, I don't see a lady. I don't see a person. I don't get it. Where's the building? Where's the bridge? Where's the coat and dress? We see things the way our brain sees it and we get locked into that. And then once we're locked in, it's difficult to see that it could actually be something totally different. But when we see the other thing, then it's like we're able to flex our brain back and forth and sometimes see the lady and sometimes see the man's face in this image. Well, business and all of this mental health, generational differences, it's all the same thing. We just have to flex our brains to think differently about certain situations and certain events and certain ways of doing things. And then we're able to flex back and forth so it's a win-win for everybody. If we stay in battle, we all lose. But when we actually meet the needs of everyone, we all win. Okay, the importance of mental health in the employer's overall success, right? So the employer has a business to run. They want to be successful. They need to have productivity. So this is the Deloitte study that I talked about in the agenda earlier. It's the 4-day work week study. And if you haven't heard of the 4-day work weeks yet, it's coming. And those who embrace the 4-day work week, we've already embraced the 4-day work week in my company. The 4-day work week shows no reduction in productivity. So why would you spread out work over 5 days if you can get the exact amount of productivity in 4 days? And if you pay people the same amount of money, nothing is lost. So much is gained when you give a day back to people who feel completely overwhelmed, which they are, which we already know from tons of research around the world that America works too many hours and we don't have siestas in the middle of the day, which we should. So the 4-day work week studies now are revealing that flexible schedules, 4-day work weeks, shared jobs, all of these kinds of things that we would think, oh my gosh, I never could have done that or don't want to do that. That's too complicated. Actually are one of the ways that we meet the mental health needs of the workforce who are not going to let us ignore the mental health needs, their mental health needs anymore. We are in the process of, and have to some pretty significant degree, destigmatized mental health in many ways. We allow people to talk about their feelings. We allow people to talk about the medications they take or the therapies that they do or the practices that they use to buffer the trauma and the anxiety and depression and other things that they suffer with. We allow that to happen now, and it's becoming more, not less. We've pulled mental health out of the closet, so to speak, and it's not going back in the closet. All right, so be a Jedi warrior. You might recognize this person in the picture, and then you don't know the other person happens to be my daughter, and that's a long time ago, but I think about 15 years ago, but we were at a Pride event in LA, and she is a millennial. I'm also the parent of a Gen Z. I have two millennials and Gen Z adults in my life, along with their partners. So that makes for about 5 or 6 people in my very, very close sphere in these two generations. And one of the things that they've taught me, as well as the work that I do has taught me from working with these two generations in particular, is that they will only work for companies that are dedicated to hiring a diverse workforce. Generation Z is the most diverse population ever in history. So their expectation of seeing people who look like themselves everywhere they go in an inclusive way is non-negotiable. And when we walk into a place where we see only dominant culture reflected, we can ask ourselves very politely, I wonder if this had something to do with systemic racism. It probably did, but we don't have to take that on. It doesn't have to be a blame game. It can be, wow, that is a powerful, powerful, unconscious way of operating that gives people an advantage, and then created a very homogeneous group who runs everything and has all the privilege. By taking away the homogeneity or the sameness of everything, what we do is we bring in diversity, diverse ideas, diverse people, diverse work schedules, diversity. We all gain from that. Now, what I experience a lot of times is people think, oh my gosh, if I have to give up my white privilege, then I'm literally giving something up, or taking a step down. In reality, that is not the truth. Every time we share our privilege with somebody, we all gain from that, and nobody loses from that. So, because when we make one group of people, whatever group that is, it doesn't matter what group of people that is, it could even be the dominant culture. When we make any group of people bear the burden of the other groups of people or certain groups of people, then we have inequity and we have mental health imbalance, and we are going to have problems within that system. Today we're talking about systems of business, but that also happens in systems of families. It happens in systems of organizations, institutions, educational facilities. It happens in every kind of system that exists in the world. So diversity, it's not just a word. It really, really has to be implemented. And it has to be implemented in a way through not only written policies and procedures, but actual implementation practices that are held accountable to the organization. So we can't just talk the talk. We actually have to walk the walk. So the next point is that companies with a diverse workforce contribute to the overall well-being of the entire organization. It's like if you only focused on your left arm all the time. You go to the doctor and you're like, yeah, my left arm hurts. Yeah, okay, I'll take that medicine. Yeah, back to the doctor. My left arm really hurts. Okay, I'm going to go to physical therapy. But you don't look at the whole body, then you're never going to correct the problem, because maybe the left arm is hurting because of circulation, or maybe the left arm is hurting because of something else, a pinched nerve in the spine. We don't know. We can't just focus on one piece. We have to look at the whole, and then we target the places that we need to make changes. So when we do that, we have overall well-being. I'm going to say it again. We have increased ROI and we have increased innovation. And innovation is not stopping. Technology is streaming forward faster than ever before in history, and that is not going to stop. It's only going to get more and more and more active. And if we let our fear slow us down, then we're going to be left behind. That's really what's going to happen. Nothing is going to really stop. We have artificial intelligence now. I mean, if you haven't seen the OpenAI GPT app, oh my gosh, it's wild. Where you can literally ask a question and get a real-time response. Students, young people are using this app at record numbers. Most of the time it's completely busy. If you haven't looked at it, go check it out. But they're starting to have OpenAI write their papers for them. Okay, that's going to transform how we do education. Do we really need students to be writing papers if AI can handle that for them? We need to think outside the box of how to educate our society in a way that doesn't have a loophole where they actually get the information, which is so cool, but we need them to learn the material too. So maybe writing the paper is the old way. We don't need to do it that way anymore. I don't know. There's going to be lots and lots of solutions, and we just need to be open and willing to embrace them, and the ones that fit with what we do. Remember, reconciling resilience. Remember that phrase. It's so important. Mental health matters more than ever to the success or failure of any business or organization. And meeting the moment with real changes, not trends. I mean, I'm so done with, these short statements about, mental health matters. Okay, what does that mean? We need to make those statements actionable, because actions speak louder than words. And we can do this. It's not an impossible thing, but we need to combine our business minds with our mental health professionals and minds. You can't do this if you only work from a business framework, and you can't do this if you only work from a mental health framework. Because what we know about mental health, remember, there are nowhere near enough mental health providers to provide the amount of mental health care that we need. So we have to normalize it into our culture, not only on a big scale, but also on our business scale. That's just the bottom line. Systemic inequality, facing, not fleeing. We have systemic inequality. You can't deny that. Nobody can deny that. It just doesn't make any sense. And this generation is not going to let anybody deny it anymore. They're going to say, this is real. We live in the most diverse population generation ever in history, and that's going to continue. So facing systemic perpetuation of stereotypes, inequity, and all the isms with an actionable plan for concrete change by rewriting policies and procedures. And most importantly, you can't just write it down. Everybody writes it down, but then they don't put it into action. It has to be put into action, and there has to be accountability for it. And so this is a shirt that I had when I actually was a farmer, and it said no human is illegal. Immigration reform now, because so much of our food system is literally provided to us at minimal costs because of an exploitation of labor of immigrant communities. So we have to reconcile that problem with resilience. We don't have to blame anyone, but we have to reconcile that we would not have the food at the cost we have it if the world were equitable. And so that's just a reality. And nobody needs to be offended by that reality. We just need to talk about it and come to win-win solutions, because there are win-win solutions. All right. I love water and I love waves. So this is one of my favorite slides, even though it soothes my soul. We need to meet the moment of change by addressing the people pillar. Our people are going to be crushed by this wave unless we teach them to do my favorite thing, which is surf it. And we can do that. People can catch this wave, and we can make it into a successful, non-life crushing ride. And so understanding how to take a life crushing event and transform it into something fun, exciting, new, innovative is transformational. And we're in a transformational period in history. And so we all need to look at our lives like this. Are we going to ride it, or are we going to get crushed by it? That's a choice. And that is a wrap. So if you have questions, please post them in the chat box, and they're going to be read to me, and then I will respond. So let's hear it.
Okay, thank you, Dr. B. We'll now transition into the Q&A portion of the session. If you'd like to submit a question, please use the Q&A window on your computer screen, type your question, and press enter. The first question that we have for you is, how do I deal with stress at work in a healthy way and prevent myself from burning out at a job I love?
Well, dealing with stress in a healthy way at work, part of that is a personal issue, and part of that is a business issue. Because if people are burning out at work, which we know they are because of stress, it's organizational. So we need to do some organizational change by looking at policies and procedures that are related to innovation, bringing in maybe a yoga class to the workplace, or letting people work a 4-day work week or have flexible schedules. There's a lot of things that organizations can do, but if you're talking about just the individual as a person, where we get caught up in and we're just so stressed, it sounds so redundant, but taking a walk, getting outside, getting fresh air we know clears the brain. Taking deep cleansing breaths. Again, it seems so corny, but when you're activated, when you do this, hold it, and you do that 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times, it actually literally changes the way the brain is operating in the moment. So we also can find support systems outside of work, people, friends, get into a group where we can talk about our mental health struggles. So there are lots of things, but there's not one just boom, this is the answer. Put the quarter in the quarter machine and you get the prize. It's not that simple. But there are lots of little strategies that do work. And self-care, again, another trendy word, is important. But I think that millennials and Gen Z are teaching us that it's not an option. We need to do it.
All right, so the next question we have has to do with what actions maybe to take when you've been down staffed about 40% for a year, then when they're bringing people in and they're leaving right away.
Oh, yes. Okay. So this is happening all over the place. It says to an organization, you've been down staffed, you're bringing in new people, but they're just like turning right around and walking out. I just spent an hour explaining why they're walking out. That says to an organization, the problem is you, and you need to really readdress your policies, procedures, and implementation practices, because the other 60% are going to walk out too because they're burned out because they're working with a 40% at 40% capacity, and no doubt struggling with the emotional tension of meeting new people who then leave and meeting new people who then leave. Because work is so much part of our social experience as well, that losing somebody that you work with, a lot of people will work just for the people that they work with. They'll work because they love their people that they work with, not because of the money. So when we understand that and we operationalize that, we can slow that bleed down. But if we just keep doing the same exact thing and waiting for the response to change, that's basically like sticking our head in the sand. It's not going to change. They're going to keep walking out because diversity matters. If you're a company that doesn't have diversity reflected in your policies, procedures, and your workforce, you're behind the times. And if you're not open to having groups at work where people can actually have conversations about how they feel about work, or have flexibility at work, or if you have very rigid rules at work that don't allow people to meet the needs of their families or their personal lives, or actually their pets' lives, guess what? They're going to leave, because at this point in history, we have just faced a global pandemic and watched 1 million people die on a counter on our television set, or a television screen, that we are not willing to say, oh yeah, I'm willing to do that one more thing and be miserable when I could be doing this other thing that actually makes meaning in my life in case I die tomorrow.
So this next one, to piggyback that, sort of it's a statement and a question. So this is someone speaking about a good portion of their coworkers are now retiring, and that's making them to feel a bit of regret that the generation of people who understood good customer service and clinical support is changing, and that's making them feel abandoned. Do you have some advice for them?
Sure. I think that what it is it's changing. And what's changing is that people are retiring, which is a beautiful thing for those people who are retiring because they want to retire, right? Like that's a goal that people have, is to retire. But we also want people to be passionate and purposeful about their work and love their work. And so the worry, all of this comes down to communication and conversations at work, because somebody is having a feeling that there's not the quality of customer service that used to be there. But then over here, is that really accurate? Is that the experience of the customer or consumer or the other people who work there? We don't know that. That's an assumption that we might be making about the way things were at this company, but there might actually be some benefits to having things done differently in customer service than they were before. Okay, let's just look at customer service for a second. I can't stand to be put on the phone with music or held on phones for a long time. And customer service, okay, it used to just be people driven where we have people responding and fixing our problems all the time. But now every single person has a cell phone. So there's literally no way that everybody can be responded to instantaneously to solve their problem with a human being on the other side of the phone. And a touch, and we all have this expectation now because we live and our brains have been wired to have this instant gratification from our cell phone. So if I'm unhappy with PG&E, guess what? I get on the phone and I want a person to help me. There aren't enough people to help everybody who needs PG&E at the same exact time. So we also need to be realistic and then think bigger about that problem instead of just getting stuck in it's different and it is a problem. Sure, it's a problem, but wherever we have a problem, we can bring everybody to the table and create a solution.
Okay, and so we have time for about one more question, Doctor, and that question is, as an employer, what can I do to start incorporating mental health programs into our business?
Acknowledge the problem right off the bat, like just acknowledge it, own it, and realize that you have to do things differently. That's the first thing. And I would say addressing, deciding that you're going to do things differently, bring everybody on board and be willing to look at policies, procedures, and implementation and accountability, and get support doing that. You need people with mental health experience as well as business experience in order to make this shift effective and possible by bringing in the voices of everybody who's involved. This is not a top-down process anymore. We're not just going to have the boss make a decision and then it's going to be implemented at the bottom, because people are going to walk. They've told us it. They've told us this, and they've shown us this because they've walked. So what you can do is you can read, research, scan this QR code, reach out to us, and we would love to talk to you about personalizing the issues that your company has, because there is no one size fits all answer. If we had an easy answer to these problems, we would have already done it. It's only when we're in crisis that we actually act and decide that we need to do something, like make air conditioners into ventilators in a week's change. So we're in a crisis. Recognize the crisis. This is as big a crisis as COVID. It's just not persistent on our screens telling us that we need to do something different, but we do. So it's personalized because some companies are small, some companies are big, but every company needs to really evaluate what they are doing and what they're going to do moving forward to meet the mental health challenges of the future. Thanks so much. We look forward to hearing from you.
That concludes today's presentation. Thank you for your attention and participation. We hope you're able to learn something new today. As a reminder, please help us improve these sessions by providing your feedback within the evaluation that will pop up after the session closes. If for any reason you missed this link, it will be resent to you tomorrow morning. For those watching on demand, you must complete and pass the post-test in order to receive credit with a score of 80% or higher. Our next course will take place on April 12th at 10 a.m. PDT on the topic of Hold On, the 4-Day Workweek is the New Normal. Registration is now open on our catalog. On behalf of all of us here today, we thank you for joining and have a wonderful day.